because we have a wonderful talk from Hudson Bush, and we're going to be covering OSEINT. That's open source emotional intelligence. Go ahead and lay it on us, Hudson.
All right. First, coping mechanisms. We'll be talking about that, giving practical examples, but keeping it as PG-13 as possible. So, context here. First, sketchy name, OSEINT. I'm not going to assume anyone knows anything, so I'm going to define what I'm talking about here. So open source emotional intelligence is kind of a play on it. Open source intelligence. In a longer form talk where I wasn't giving half of this on personal and half of this on work, I would go into the details of OSEINT. I would talk about that outside of the scope here. I'm going to hit on some of those subjects and some of the terms. This is not an OSEINT primer. This is a know yourself primer. This is a how emotional intelligence and self-knowledge and mental health makes you a better InfoSec analyst and ultimately a better person on the personal side. So context here, I am going to be talking a lot about myself, part of just practical examples. So I already kind of introed this, that knowing yourself, being a better person makes you a better analyst. But really my focus here is not work. My focus is giving tips to make us better people, because ultimately I don't care as much about you at work. If you're good, if you should be happy, you should be healthy, you should be all of those things, and hopefully it flows over into work and not be thinking the other way. Essentially, how do I become a better worker, and it overflows into personal? That's not how it happens. So I already said, very ADHD focused because I am very ADHD. So if you knew me in person, you would know that within about a second. Even just seeing me fidget back and forth, you can probably tell. But again, I'm not just, this isn't just a self-centered, I want to talk about myself for 40 minutes, although I could, and I do like that. This is about how understanding my own implicit biases is key to better, quicker decision-making and just everything, and how you can apply that to yourself. So I'm going to jump forward for just 1 second to go into story time, because I like telling stories. So understanding ADHD. One of the key things, one of the big things about ADHD, there's things on here, but don't like silence. Don't like to be next to another human and just sitting there. So if you know the love languages, that can really not work well with anyone who likes quality time. I tend to like to fill empty space with words. So an example of this is I am at a conference in DC. I'm going from one hotel down to the other. And another thing about me, going back to executive function, which I will explain, I get to things at the last possible minute because it's very hard to motivate my brain to do things. So I'm going from one hotel to another. I jump in an Uber, and normal Uber experience. The app pops up and tells you one of those, like, Andre is an excellent conversationalist. I get in, just kind of mumbles hello, playing some light French music, something like that. So we pull up. He goes, "Hey, why am I driving you from one hotel to the other?" I say, "Oh, I'm going to a cybersecurity training." He says, "Oh, cybersecurity again." He's talking very quiet, mumbles something about Russia. And this is like weeks after the Russian cyber attacks on the Ukrainian power grid. So I casually mention something about Vladimir Putin and blah, 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 Ukraine. So key here is going back to what I just said, I like to fill things with empty words. I don't always think about it. I just kind of throw out words. Vladimir Putin is not a casual conversation piece that you throw out casually. There's very few situations that Vladimir Putin is just something casual that's not going to raise any red flags. So immediately, this guy, who I couldn't pick up an accent, anything before, at the top of his lungs. Now, me and a friend are in the car, and I'm in the front, sitting next to the driver. My friend's in the back. And the driver, at a red light, looks at me and starts screaming, not in these words, but PG-13 version, screw Russia, screw Putin. I was commander in the war. Putin, he wants me dead. And then proceeds to ask me if I can help him to hack into Putin's bank accounts. And I'm in this moment where I think I'm going to get kidnapped and I'm going to be some hacker slave in some Georgian man's basement. So my point there, funny anecdotes, intro, all this, but then also know yourself. Know that I like to just talk. I will throw things out. Learn what triggers people may have. Learn what things are not appropriate to repeat in mixed company. And Vladimir Putin is not a casual conversation piece. Maybe in the Slack at the end, maybe you can tell me an example where Vladimir Putin is something that you can say casually without pissing anyone off. I can't think of very many. So that does bring me back to what I should have introed at the beginning, that questions, I'm going to be available on Slack. I have my Twitter handle, all of that. I'm open for questions, so save them, tag me on Slack, DM me, whichever makes most sense for you. But I'm going to probably go over. I will not have time to answer questions for everybody. I also know I talk very fast. Hopefully, those of you can pick stuff up, but then also there will be captions when these things are recorded. So, learning stuff. How does this have to do with emotional intelligence? Really has to do with self-knowledge. So again, the thesis here is how knowing yourself and mental health can make you a better analyst. So one of the reasons I have slides right now, I wouldn't like slides, I wouldn't read along, but some people need that visual stimulation. Some people need that, some people need to see the words. It's easier for them to follow along. So you could do an entire talk on just the learning styles, but understanding how you learn and not as much demanding, but trying it all possible to figure out, not just like, oh, that person learned so well at conference talk. I do. I don't know why I was horrible at school, but I can sit in a lecture room and absorb the information. Virtual conferences, these don't work for me. So maybe this is clicking in your brain and maybe you're going, oh, wait, the way I learn isn't bad. That's what I want you to get out of this, is that like, if you think, wow, people go to conferences and they learn so much, why can't I? You know what? You may learn better reading a book. You may learn better sitting in your car with a podcast. You may learn better interpersonal. I know people that if I explain this to them one-on-one would do very well, but listening to it in a group mass setting doesn't work. So logical learners, there's all of these. This is more of a jump point to, if something in here triggers this, pursue it. But this applies to personal life, to all sorts of things. I mean, we're constantly learning. So this just applies to how do you absorb information in a way that really clicks for you. I think a lot of us fall in that bottom one. I mean, a lot of us like that solitary learning by yourself. Some people are physical. Some people, you throw them like a box and say, hey, configure, build this. They couldn't read a SOP or a build guide to save their lives. And if you tell them to like build an elastic stack, blah, 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 but building by your instructions, they couldn't do it. They couldn't follow your instructions, but they need to get in there and break it and see it and touch it with their hands. Understand yourself, understand what you need, and where at all possible, enforce those boundaries or request help, request things in the way that makes sense for you. So in an ideal world, I have slides on all sorts of neurodivergencies and all sorts of different ways and give you all tips. Again, this was not thrown together, but this is developed in the week. So let me talk about ADHD. I'm going to talk about myself. And I apologize if for anyone, they start going, ooh, maybe I have this. I've never heard ADHD. I am not a doctor. Maybe go talk to a professional if any of these trigger. But again, none of this is shame. I mean, I think so often we focus on like, oh, everyone learns this way. Everyone does this way. Everyone thinks this way. And there's no wrong way to think or learn or do or be, as long as you're not hurting another person. I mean, this is just so much of this is what I'm talking about, is personalizing things to you and understanding yourself and how you tick. So executive function, you may have heard this term. It's the other, I see it, executive dysfunction. I don't like the acronym ED. That's not, yeah. So what this means is that, so executive function is that part of your brain that helps you with time management and helps you decide, this is what I need to do at this time. Okay, to leave to the train on time, I need to leave now, these sort of things. That part of my brain doesn't work. I do things when it's stimulating. I do things that for one of two reasons. I mean, I am like I turn procrastination into an art. It's like the American Ninja Warrior of procrastination. I wait till the very last second to do anything. Now I have turned it into really an art where I can get things done quick. The way my brain works is I can take in information, and it's almost like those enhanced video rendering machines where like the really fancy computers, you feed in a bunch of information and it spits out what you want, mainframe style. I can do that. I can sit there and process, and in 5 minutes write a presentation. You may not be able to do that. You may need to learn all of their coping mechanisms. I will talk about coping mechanisms in a sec. But if this sounds like you, learn coping mechanisms. For some people, it works to trick themselves. Tell yourself in your brain, set your timer for something different. Tell yourself you need to leave by a certain time. Set artificial constraints on yourself. But it can be very hard to motivate yourself to do what you need to at the time. So a very inane example here is like, so my wife will, leave with the kids for an hour and a half, something like that. And she'll be like, hey, do you mind just picking up this or whatever, some 5-minute task that most people might do in the first 5 minutes and then have an hour and 15 to themselves or an hour and 25 to themselves if you know how to do math. What I do is I sit in my chair and I'm going to do that in a second, but I can't enjoy anything until I do that. I'll sit in the chair, see that she's almost home and do the thing very quickly. That's executive dysfunction. This isn't stimulating. And the way to make it stimulating is something's going to happen in 5 minutes. Someone's going to come home and be like, what did you do? Or whichever, all of these, it's deadlines for work. It happens all the time. So constant stimulation. I know some people at work that literally need to consume 3 forms of media. I know people that are listening to music while watching a video, while working. And they can do this all while on a Zoom and listen to all 3. You may have those cycles in your brain. You may be able to do that. I cannot. What I do is I have music on constant. If I'm not in a meeting, I have music on constantly. And I have so many avenues going in my brain that the music quiets so many of those. And it makes me able to focus on one track. There are much more unhealthy ways for me to do that. Things like alcohol, things like that make it so your brain's functioning at a lower level, so you only have one track. One of the healthiest ways for me is music. Something like that can focus your brain on one track. That helps really well, gives you that stimulation, so maybe the task that you're working on doesn't have to be stimulating. But then there's also things like, this can also almost be a superpower. I know that's kind of faux pas. You don't call, disabilities superpowers, but sometimes my brain and my intuition and I may have a task that is due today, but sometimes if Harry Potter, the Felix Felicidus, you almost feel like you have to do that thing. Sometimes the constant stimulation can lead me down that path where I'm like, I do this thing that ended up being the right thing. And my brain knew that stimulating thing, it was stimulating because that was the right thing to do. Sometimes you got to learn to quiet yourself and say, that is not the thing. Shut up. I got to do this thing. And again, this is all coping mechanisms, figuring it out. I also am a verbal processor. It's partially why I like these conference talks. And those little asides, I like to give context. Like, I know myself. I have learned myself. I know why I'm doing this. I like conference talks because I like verbal processing. I like these things. I like talking through my thoughts. It is so useful. I have a team of people like, my Ring Zero, which I will get to that a bit more, where if I have a presentation or even just a personal thing in my life, whatever, I can verbal process with these people. And that's so helpful. You may have never tried it. Maybe try it. It may work for you. It may not. If it doesn't work, you may not have the right trusted people. Some people really need to process in themselves. Some people need to journal. I work so well verbal processing, but I also, talking about that team of 5, you you can overwhelm your people by and come off as self-centered by constantly talking about yourself. If you know that you need 10 hours a week of verbal processing, do not put that on one person. You will tax that relationship. I mean, spread this out amongst people. Okay. Tools. Listen to those who know you best. So have the ring zero group of friends and understand your groups of friends. I mean, you friends, colleagues, family, whichever. People that you trust, that their feedback, you don't have to process it. You don't have to fully vet that. You just know this person knows me and trusts me, and I trust them, and I will let that feedback in. But then someone who you've only known for 2 days may say some nonsense, and don't always let that be personal. Don't always take that deep into your heart. Don't always just absorb that, because that person doesn't know you. That person, that person doesn't necessarily, they may, but they don't necessarily have your best interest at heart. So understanding who you can trust, listening to those people, requesting their feedback, verbally processing with them. And again, those rings could go out. You may have a bunch of people that you can talk to. You may have a ring one where you're like, I just need to, this is a bit of a grain of salt. But you will hopefully reach a point in your life where you have a group of people that are your ring zero, that there's no grain of salt. They may have a bad day and you may just need to excuse that or process that with them, but you don't have to take things with a grain of salt. You go, this person knows me, let me chew on that. And it shouldn't be offensive. Meditation and silence. This is so hard for so many people. I talked about I don't like silence. I can't do it in a lot of places, but I also know how key this is to me. Because my brain is always going for the most stimulating thing. And one of the nice things about silence, and it can be any amount of time, is that I don't like the traditional meditation. I don't like the force all the thoughts out of your brain. At some point you might reach that. I've done it a few times in my life. It's really hard to get to for someone like me who's constantly thinking, processing, talking. But one of the nice things about silence is thoughts come up in your brain. Thoughts come up and you don't have other things going on. So you can chase some of those threads to the end. You can let those things hit you can let those things go and even just chase down in some of those moments of meditation, go, wait, okay, 3 days in a row, this thing that I haven't thought about in 12 years is coming up. And this can just help you identify some of what makes you tick, why you work. But this is a tip this is a really practical thing I like to apply. I've tried to help some people with, is that a lot of us aren't driving to work, but you're driving somewhere or you're on some commute somewhere. If you have a time like that in your drive or in your car, try turning off the podcast and the radio and don't call someone. Sit there while you're driving, let your thoughts exhaust, let your thoughts go, get to somewhere where you can quiet yourself, you can decompress, you can do those things. More traditional meditations, there are apps out there. They're smart devices. I'm going to talk about that in just a sec, but you may work well with more guided stuff, the background noise, all of those things. I do that on occasion, but I really like those times of unguided silence that kind of let your brain exhaust. And with decompression, this comes in so many ways, and sometimes in unhealthy ways. It can come out in vegging on your phone, but some of this is, again, self-knowledge. Figure out, maybe that's healthy for you, maybe it isn't. But figure out when you are high strung, when you are stressed from work, when even just code switching between things, what works well for you to decompress and get from one mode to the other and let that stuff fall off you. It may be meditation and silence. It may be talking to someone. For some people, it's processing your day to yourself. Something I like to do, and this is like an Ignatius of Loyola stuff, which I could talk for hours about, but something called the examine, which is at the end of your day, try and just let this be free thought, what comes into your brain. What was your high point and your low point? What was the best thing that happened to you, the worst thing, however you want to phrase that. And think why. Sometimes something weird pops into your brain, and like someone said hi to me or something like that. Some weird thing comes in, and think why that was good, why the bad thing was bad. Because sometimes it's something that was so inane, that was so unimportant. Why is that what's coming up 8 hours later? Do that. Do what you need to decompress. Again, nothing is one size fits all. Smart device. Okay. I know the privacy concerns. A lot of times, I don't care. For the most part, I think I'm not that important of a target. Do your threat modeling. Figure out what you need. I am willing to take the risk of some of the smart devices because I love data. I'm a nerd for it. It helps me understand things. So I have a smart ring. I have a smart watch. The ring, senses like my specific oxygen and my heart rate and my temperature. And when you're calm, your hands can go up 1 or 2 degrees in temperature. Not like you have a fever, not like anything's wrong, but all these things, this data, and you can say, wait, yesterday I was feeling stressed in this, or yesterday I went swimming in the morning, or I went for a run, and the rest of the day my data looks good. Sometimes you can't always trust your brain and your perception of the day, and sometimes your body's telling you something. I love this stuff. I mean, I love the data I can get off those things. They really help me. They even help me. They have like guided meditation apps and things that you into your body signals and will be adapted. I love that stuff. Again, look at your threat model. Look at what works for you. You may just say smart devices. Nope, not putting that stuff on my body. I don't need someone to track my location. You can turn off geolocation. But something that works for me, and I'm willing to take those risks. So, coping mechanisms. This could easily get very much more than PG-13. So I'm going to keep things vague for the most of this. Coping mechanisms and tailoring them are all about learning yourself. What is healthy for you today may not be healthy for you tomorrow. What is healthy for someone else may not be healthy for you. You may not know. You may think it's healthy, and you need to assess these things. I mean, so I have lived on coping mechanisms my entire life. I've had to. It was some, just different things in me. So I mean, classic example is coffee. While it's a stimulant for a lot of people, it can help to focus. People with ADHD, things like that. Learning, like at moments that I might need stimulation, I might need to calm down. Again, don't want to get too much into alcohol, but talked about like that earlier, how that can help silence some of the other tracks in my brain. But I've kind of hinted at coping mechanisms through this entire thing that setting artificial time constraints or some things like that may really work for you. And this is all just learning what you need to succeed. So tying a lot of this in, I'm going to go to this slide because apparently I exhausted some of my material, but I have some things to jump back to. So I may jump back in slides, but I'm going to tell some stories for a bit. So the whole thesis here, the whole thing I'm talking about is implicit bias. Is what do you need to succeed in all of that? So let's talk about what that applies to us in InfoSec and as analysts. So herd alert fatigue. We get alerts, we get all sorts of things. I mean, key to this job is at some point being so familiar with your alerts that you can make very quick decisions. And a lot of us have gotten there, but I think we also need to understand, why are we making those decisions? I mean, knowing yourself and, some of that stuff I was talking about earlier with silence, chasing down those threads, saying, why am I thinking that? Why is that bothering me? Looking at some of your stereotypes and biases and the things going on in your brain that lead you to say, okay, this must be a very high fidelity alert, or this must not. And I mean, it's just so key because we are analyzing intelligence, we are analyzing data, and we are doing that processing. I mean, at some point we should, not to dehumanize, but think of our brains in a logical computing sense and think, how do I tune this machine to be able to go through the data? I mean, so you may not be on the analyst side, you may be doing vulnerability research, but at some point you need to make a decision. Is this good? Is this bad? Is this a track to pursue? Is this, if you're in threat intelligence, is this a reliable IOC? Is this low, high confidence? But understanding, I mean, in some ways, think of this like a detection analyst would. So detection analysts and detection engineers take all of the alerts that come in And if this is a false positive, how do I reduce false positives, and how do I increase true positives? How do I reduce the amount of alerts we're getting? Think of that same thing in your brain. Look back through and say, okay, I made this decision and it was wrong. How could I have done that better? I mean, don't be hard on yourself, but let's look at an improvement. Let's look at our biases. Let's do that in personal life. Okay, I thought if I said this, this person would do this. They did this. I thought that this person would never do this to me. And without placing blame on anyone, thinking, okay, how could I maybe have predicted that? How could I have maybe seen that? How could I have maybe prevented that? How can I cause the impact in the world that I want to see based on the things I've seen and the things I want to be out there? So, I mean, again, I'm always thinking. Like I said, this stuff works very well for me because I can point my brain towards certain things because I can't turn this stupid thing off. You may have to force yourself towards some of this, but what I'm saying is that we have all of these input sources. We have this information. We have people. We can, going back to all the tools I'm talking about, I'm talking very personal then, but then in work, hey, you know what? You came to this conclusion and I didn't. How did you get there? Can you walk me through it? And it's funny, this could be at the beginning of your career. This could be you have certain biases going in because what you think or you don't know, but you may actually have a lot less biases. The people later on in their career we may be getting more to like, you know what, nothing has ever happened from that type of alert. And someone new may take it serious and analyzing that and deconstructing some of that every once in a while, getting rid of that crud, that is bringing you to make some of the incorrect decisions. I think that is so key. I mean, a great example of this, I hate calling it Log4j, it's Log4j. So many things in the industry that are like that. It'll be so hard for me, even if I know the correct name or there's a new name, Bro to Zeke. So many of these things are just so hard for me to ever say right. So, but Log4j, it's a great example. Coming in very quickly and making some of those decisions. Is this a risk? Is this something that I need to focus on? I mean, ultimately, we need to patch all the things. We need to mitigate all the things. But if you have a team of, really two of us, at Dragos, where I work for on the InfoSec team, if you have a team of two remediating this, or you have, a wider team of 19 in IT that are helping us, but like, how do we prioritize our efforts? How do we focus in this stuff? How do we say pretty quickly, yeah, I think this is high risk, how is this not? And some of these are going to be technical resources. But ultimately, a lot of these decisions are coming down to your brain. A lot of these decisions are coming down to you deciding whether to pursue this avenue or not. Chasing those threads. And something that I haven't talked about is sometimes this stuff is hard. A lot of people, me at some point in my life, like to not think through the hard things. Some of these things may be hard things. Some of these, like work stuff, may be easy. Or maybe one of your triggers is you really like being right. You don't want to be wrong about your detection, or your decision, or aimed at work, or whatever, and you don't want to think through why I was wrong. If at all possible, let's try and chase down those leads. And it may be chiseling a little bit, but I am someone that deeply wants peace in my life. And for a long time, that meant zero conflict. But I've also learned that zero conflict ends up to avoiding conflict, which means that you have these high bits of conflict at points in your life. So in chasing peace, we bring chaos and unpeace. So sometimes you use the thing you don't like to your advantage. I know that some amount of conflict or some amount of, I'm going to clear this slide. I'm going to unshare because I'm just talking now. But you all can obviously write me on Twitter, HomebrewedSec, or on the Slack. So back to, I chase down these leads. I look in my, okay, if I have this hard conversation with myself or someone else, could this lead to not an explosive conflict at some point in the future? Can me thinking through why that bad thing happened, make it so that bad thing doesn't happen again. I mean, let's evaluate some of these self-fulfilling prophecies in our life. Again, none of this is victim blaming. I mean, and I think we can so easily get there in our brains where we're like, okay, I'm a bad person. I did this wrong. But it's more objectively, logically thinking like, how did this thing happen? And again, I'm trying to talk in broad strokes. I'm trying to both talk personal life and work. So some of this may sound overdramatic, like, a detection or, a vulnerability decision or a patching decision is not like the most critical thing, but it's the same stuff that we're applying here. It's, I have learned, let's say that somebody is verging on bullying at work, or someone is abrupt. Having a conversation with them, talking to that person and just saying, hey, really quick, hey, can you elaborate on that? That comment just did not sit well with me. Now, maybe you have to talk to HR or your manager first, but heading some of those things up so you don't get into a point where to fix that, there's nothing but explosive. And again, this is not innate for most people. It's not innate for me. It hurt at first, but I do it, and and it brought me to a place that, again, I don't know who likes Enneagram. I know it's all pop psychology, but I love it. It works with me. Type 9 is the peacemaker, and that's what I am. So everyone's like, hey, you cannot actually be a peaceful person. You will start little conflicts. You will have uncomfortable conversations. But I have learned that the thing that I hate is the thing that I need, and learn to use it to my advantage. It's almost like pumping the brakes a little bit so that you don't have to slam on your brakes, and doing those things, speed checking when you need. So, and again, I mean, these could apply to very different personality types. Like I said, I'm talking to myself, because in an ideal world, this would be an hour talk where I'm talking about, just talking about this and not having to put in the personal things. And I would sit here and go through, if your personality type is, someone who really likes fun, how you could apply these same things. And I could go through all these things. Someone who really likes that kind of stimulation, that fun and good vibe. Why, for a short bit, approaching that and harshing the vibe for a second may actually get you to a better vibe in general. Like, someone who likes creativity and all of these different things, they could apply. I, didn't do that research, didn't talk to those people, didn't do those interviews, so I can't speak authoritatively on all that. So I'm talking about myself. But I'm also hoping that some of this is an example, like, hey, this guy is willing to talk negatively about himself and think negatively about himself in a way that ultimately makes him more confident, more positive, and all of these things. That's a good thing for me to pursue. Some of this is getting a mentor. Maybe I talked about that ring zero. Maybe you don't have those trusted people in your life. Maybe you pursue a mentor at school or work or some professional organization or something. You may have to find that externally. I mean, there's a whole networking and mentorship channel here on the Slack. You may be able to pair up with someone there. It's about finding the resources that you need to become a better person, that'll make you better at work as well, but also just you are a better person, a happier person. I mean, I don't mean better person objectively, like there's this perfect goal, but I'm just talking about, being able to think through these things and analyze these things. And I'm rambling a bit. So I'm going to try and land the ship a little bit. Again, I'm going to repeat the thesis here that emotional intelligence, that self-knowledge that hurts, that may and shouldn't hurt horribly. If it does, back off, but that might not be the thing you want to pursue, makes you a better person that can bleed over into work, can bleed over into being a better analyst because you've gotten rid of some of this implicit bias. I mean, and I've talked about so many avenues. Some of these may not work for you. Maybe this is a jumping board for you to think through the things that work better for you. you may try some of these things in in a relationship or at work, and it may not work for you. Maybe start evaluating, hey, maybe for me to be healthier, let's find another workplace. Let's pursue this, but pursue health in your life. And I mean, all things are kind of bloom and blossom.
Yeah, no, this was a fantastic talk, Hudson. Everyone in the chat's really loving it. I think one of the great things is it gave people in the chat time to talk about their own ADHD, neurodivergency that they have. There were some questions that people had of each other in the chat that were answered very well. And so topics like this are great because it spurs discussion. And one of the things I was thinking about this was kind of, when you're thinking about job positions and everything, some of the phrases that are used in job positions that keep people who are neurodivergent out of jobs because they say something like, um, uh, I don't know, like they say something about like being able to present well, or they talk about something that maybe mannerisms that are a little harder for neurodivergent folks to work with. And they need to word things differently in order to encourage more people to apply. And we also need to value neurodivergent folks in our workforce, because as you've been talking about, when you look through incidents, one person's going to see something in an incident and think, oh, this is nothing. Another person sees it and immediately thinks of something else and tracks down a bad thing that's going on. And without those conversations going on between each other and those different analyses, it's very hard to get your mind outside of yourself and everything like that. So having that emotional intelligence with yourself and others is great, but it also helps to have neurodivergent folks on staff and partners and working with those folks too, doesn't it?
Yo, that is a great point. Yeah, I mean, we almost have like a little neurodivergent club within our department, and we'll be like, hey, did you see that? Hey, did you? And like kind of like boosting each other up, and then saying, so that person just said that. That applies to them, but a little different to us, things like that. So even forming those groups of people where you can kind of, again, I'm not trying to make this just a neurodivergent club. I mean, these things may apply to everyone, but it's also, there's no shame, I mean, in any of this, and finding your group of people that you can talk to and finding, the ways that things work for you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.